Okay, I think we've got a lot of people here, so I'm going to go ahead and get going. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for participating in the Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee for the Oregon Toll Program, which includes the Regional Mobility, thank you, Nicole, the Regional Mobility Pricing Project and I-205 Toll Project. For myself, Jessica Stanton, and on behalf of ODOT, we appreciate your time and commitment to this process. Let's begin with a centering exercise. So find a comfortable position in your chair with your back tall and relaxed. Close your eyes or softly gaze downward. Follow your breath. Feel your feet on the ground. Place your hands comfortably in your lap. Invite your mind to be still. Deeply breathe in slowly and breathe out slowly. Deeply breathe in slowly and hold it. And breathe out slowly. One more deep breath in slowly, hold it, and slowly release the air. Breathe normally again, and gently open your eyes. Thank you again to everyone who is here. We all appreciate your time and contributions to this process. So just a little bit of housekeeping. When it comes to technical help, Nick is the person to go to. Please note his phone number and his email just in case you need it later. We will be recording the entire meeting. What you say is part of the public record. The recording will be made available for public review next week. To find more information about the project, please go to OregonTolling.org. Community members, you are welcome to email your public comments to us at OregonTolling@odot.state.or.us. Please add committee public comment in the subject line. So as we move through our meeting today, let's keep in mind the Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee working together agreements. I love these. Listen, believe, and reflect. Accept non-closure for the moment. Speak your own truth with compassion. Listen to understand, don't listen to respond. Value and celebrate each other's experiences. Open hearts plus open minds lead to exploration of possibilities. Make space, then take space, be concise. Bring your best thinking into the room, attack the problem, not the person. Disagreement, frustration, and differences of opinion are acknowledged, explored, and addressed. So we have two proposed outcomes for this meeting today. They include, one, for the committee to further the development of a recommendation to the Oregon Transportation Commission, and two, for the committee's understanding and opportunity to provide feedback on the Regional Mobility Pricing Project Purpose and Need Statement. Let's take a look at our agenda. So we have an exciting full meeting planned for you today. Our agenda topics include, first, taking in where we have been and where we're going. And then next, today's meal, our main course, which is moving towards equity and mobility advisory recommendations. You'll see that we have a plethora of speakers today here to talk through the dynamic elements contributing to EMAC's recommendations. And then we'll hear an update from the NEPA SCUBA team about the committee's input on the Regional Mobility Pricing Project Purpose and Need Statement. And then we'll hold space for public comments and committee member updates from their work in the community. And then we'll close the meeting. So we have a full agenda. Let's go ahead and move forward. So where we have been and where we're going. So as we've done before, let's refresh our memories with the EMAC game plan. In April and May of this year, the focus was on the transit and multimodal policy strategy bucket. Then in June and July, we pivoted to neighborhood health and safety. In August, we took a deep dive into the affordability policy strategy bucket. So today, for the fall, September through November, We're reflecting and readying your first round equitable policies recommendation for the Oregon Transportation Commission. On this next slide, we're looking at images that remind us of our process and how your ideas continue to move us forward. So during the last meeting, we started with the affordability, preferred policy, and strategy options in the document of the same name. Then we workshopped your ideas, gathered everything we heard from you to update the document. Then based on what we heard, we updated the affordability policy and strategy options. You may notice that the icon on the far right, that we've left updates and track changes in the document. The updated affordability preferred policy and strategy options document is available for you in the meeting materials packet. And just so you know, all the updated affordability policy and strategy options have also been integrated into the new all-inclusive policy strategy document. Next slide, please. So when you look at this golden background, know that it's EMAC taking the lead with key partners supporting you. So this word cloud is a depiction of all the different layers of people, groups, and tools that are coming together to help create your EMAC recommendation. We want you to know that we recognize all these integral parts are required, and you are not alone in navigating the seas of equitable tolling. We know there's input from the community and ODOT's partnership with you and OTC's partnering and guidance for you, and then equity tools like the equity framework and the trauma-informed perspective that you are using as lenses to carry this work forward. And then of course, there is data, all the technical planning data that you review, develop, and contribute to. So with this in mind, we've gathered speakers here today to give more information and offer guidance as needed to advance the committee's recommendation. So just a friendly reminder, this is the last meeting as a committee to look at all the options before we come back together as a full committee to determine what the draft recommendation will be in October. So let's move to our today's meal, which is moving towards Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee recommendations. So with this dynamic and vital goal, we decided to serve up more than today's meal. So we're serving up more of a multi-course tasting menu. And to help us do that, we have, let's just look at the first topic. So ODOT and OTC's partnership with EMAC from individuals you know. We'll hear from ODOT's Toll Program Director, Lucinda Broussard, and your committee colleague and the liaison to the Oregon Transportation Commission, Commissioner Sharon Smith. We understand that a supportive partnership with ODOT is important to the committee. And we heard from this committee sub-team, the Navigators. A couple of months back, we spoke with Commissioner Smith about setting up EMAC and OTC for success. And we'll move to the next slide whenever you get a chance. So this is why we invited Lucinda and Sharon to our meeting today, so they can share with us what they need to balance within ODOT and the OTC when they receive your recommendations. They'll help us understand the choices and trade-offs needed to work through for equity. So with that, I welcome Lucinda.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for, I always feel invited, but thank you for this opportunity actually just to speak to you guys. So it's been a while, but I remember when I first met you guys and I said, wow, this is going to be great because you guys are going to bring something to the table that we have never experienced before. And you guys are proving that is proving to be true. So I'm still excited about what the recommendations will be in the end. Equity is something that we're all working towards, but it is work to be done. And so thank you for actually plowing that ground for us. We do appreciate it. And, we're always here to support. That's what we do. That's what we've been doing. As you can see, what we try to do is make sure that we provide you the information so you can ruminate on it, you can refine it, you can make decisions on it. We're not leading that effort. We're just here to support you. So we're like that backbone that just says, what do you need? And that's what we're here to do. So we want to continue to do that. That is why we're here. We're here to support you. And we want to make sure that you know that we're going to support you as you go to the OTC too with your recommendations. When we talk about what's our finance and how all this works, it's kind of now we're talking about what it might be. We don't have toll rates. Toll rates don't come till about 6 months before we go live, and live means turn on the system and start taking tolls. And that's really dependent on what that looks like, what the toll rate is, how much money it is. It's called an investment grade traffic and revenue study. So think about it like the bank does. They look at your credit report, they look at your possibilities, they grade you, and then they say, okay, this is how much you could finance something for. This is how much money you're expecting to, for us, it would be like, here's our wages. And that's what we're saying we can make on tolls. So here's our wages for that. And then they would take our credit, and then they would make that determination about how much money that they could give us and what that toll rate would look like. That's not happening until we're almost ready to go. So at this point, we have no money. We don't have a project yet. We're talking about projects, but we don't really have one in the hopper that we can go for it to an investment grade and get what this toll rate will be. And then they're just going to give us parameters. They're going to say, these are the parameters for toll rates. We're going to take all that information and go to OTC with that information to say, here's how much money we could, charge. And they're going to look at it and go, does it pay bills? I mean, because the first thing that we have to do is, of course, pay the bills. So if we borrow money, we got to pay it back. So just like home mortgage, same idea. So they'd have to look at how much money do we have? Are we expecting to get? How much do we need to spend? And then how much do we need to keep the system going? Because it's operations and maintenance. Got to pay those bills too. And then how much for the rest of the work that we want to do? Because it's just not these projects. It's supposed to be for congestion management relief. So they'll have to look at that too. So, as we go forward, we're looking at those things. But one of the things I always say about equity and the ideal of how much money does equity cost? I always say equity is priceless. It costs us a lot to get here. It'll cost us a lot to get out of here. But the question is, if we had $1, where would we put that first dollar? And that's what we need to know. We need to know that from you. Where would we put the first dollar? What are some of the things that we can do that are not based on financials, but that are based on just good equity practices to put in place? So we're expecting that from you guys too. Next slide. Do I have a next slide, or am I a one slide girl? I'm a 2-slide girl today. So when we talk about delivering on day one, what can we do? As I said, we're not going to have that kind of financing until after the project goes live. But what are some of the things we could do? What partners can we partner with? What things can we get in front of? Those are the things we're looking at now. So it's not like we have a pot of money in front of us right now, but we're looking at what we can do, how we do stretch the dollars in the front end and not the back end. And just to let you know that, all the things that you're talking about for equity I'm just like, if we could do them all, that'd be great. But, there's not an endless, as I said, it's priceless. There's not an endless amount of money that we have to do all the work. But prioritizing the work is important. What things you think we should do first? I think that's paramount to what we do. What's the biggest impact we can make on communities by doing what? And then figuring out that cost and making sure that we're in front of OTC and saying, hey, here are some of the equity things that we think are priorities, and we'd like you to go forward with these first. So we want to be there as your support as you come up with equity measures. We know we couldn't do this work ourselves. That's why we have you. And I just want to make sure that I let you guys know. I'm looking up because my screen is up, but my computer is down where my camera is, so I apologize. Is that we're also looking at what's the next iteration of EMAC, because we have the Regional Mobility Pricing Project. And we want to make sure that we keep having this equity thread as we go through. So we'll be looking at that too. Equity doesn't go away. And we know that it's not a one size fits all. So what we're talking about here for I-205, some of the beginning parts of our MPP or Regional Mobility Pricing Project, that's just the beginning. There's another project coming on, and we'll need to have some equity for that too. And we know that it's not the same amount and same dose, but what is it? So we'll be looking to do another equity type committee as we go forward. As we said, we were going to have equity in our NEPA work, and we'll continue to do that. I just want to say thank you for all the work you have done and that you're doing. We do appreciate it. I've learned so much from you guys, and I continue to be just like astounded and amazed by all of the things that, you think you know, but you really don't. And you guys have taught me a lot, so I appreciate it. And I'm going to turn it back over to Jessica. So thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you, Lucinda. That was great. Do we have any quick questions for Lucinda? Okay. Hearing none, let's move on to Sharon.
Thank you, Jessica. And Lucinda, that was a great framing of where we are. Oh, I see John has a question. Maybe we'll take that before I jump in.
That sounds good. I just saw that. John, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, apologies on the delayed clickety-clack stuff there. And Lucinda, you might not be the right person, but I believe I've seen this, but I just wanted to make sure. Who at ODOT is doing the Title VI analysis, right? Or are you waiting on the actual projected toll level? Because I mean, I understand we don't really know like how much and like the resources that would be drawn from it, but I imagine you're indexing other toll projects to get a sense of what the cost would be, or would that come, or who would be doing that sort of civil rights review, Title VI review of the ultimate toll product or process?
And I don't know that answer, so I'm going to look for Garrett to see if he knows. I know we have the Office of Civil Rights, but I'm thinking that that's not going to touch here, that we'll be doing that through the NEPA. Where are you, Garrett?
Yeah, I'm here. I'll double back on this answer, but from what I've heard before when we've looked into it, is John, you'll see part of that come through. Actually, Title VI and NEPA come from similar kind of federal law directive. And so the type of work you're seeing that'll be produced in NEPA does the analysis that would fulfill, the requirements under Title VI.
Okay.
So I can make sure I can get you timing on that information and when it kind of comes out.
No, that makes sense. And I forgot about the NEPA, which is this umbrella. You're right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the question.
Thanks, John. So I think let's hold our questions and we'll go to Sharon, and then we'll have some more time for questions after Sharon.
Great. Thank you. And I was just going to say again, Lucinda, thanks for framing up kind of where we are, and sort of, it feels like a chicken and egg. We don't know how much money we're going to have until we, get to that part of the study, but we're also asking for equity recommendations, and it feels like, well, we need to know how much money there is, but we don't. And so that's why I think it's really important that what we are asking for is policy direction and priorities, as opposed to spend X amount on this. That's just really not something that would be helpful at this point, but it's frustrating for everyone, I'm sure. And just wanted to give a little bit of kind of bookends for the work that the OTC does, because we aren't always the deciders. We work at the direction of the legislature and the direction of the governor, and House Bill 2017 is really the directive we've been given to implement tolling and major highway projects. So tolling is a decision that the legislature has made and tasked the OTC to implement. We also have to deliver major highway projects, and we don't have enough funds to do all of that. So part of the purpose of the tolling is to have some funding for infrastructure, but also a second directive is for congestion management. So we have two dual goals in implementing the tolling. And so those are kind of our bookends, and we have guardrails in terms of what we can spend money on. There's constitutional restrictions on toll revenues, but we do have other funds available that we can look at shifting funds from other sources to fund non-tolling eligible projects. And that's something that the OTC is really willing to consider, and we are committed to equity. It's one of our key goals in our three-part strategy in the strategic plan to do that. And so keep talking about projects that may not be able to be funded by tolling, and maybe we can figure out how to pay for that. Could we go to the next slide, please? Recently, we took the largest shift at the OTC to fund non-highway in the STIP. And that is an illustration of our commitment to equity and multimodal transportation. And so just be aware that the whole OTC body really is committed to equity and funding of multimodal projects and transit, not just building highways. And so we'll be very receptive to your policy recommendations, because those are key goals in our strategic action plan. So I would turn it back to Jessica, or we can maybe open it up for roundtable conversation about what the committee is feeling or has questions about.
This is a great opportunity to have questions from the committee, and also just consider this question. Thank you, Sharon. Sorry, my apologies. I want to thank you for that too. How can the Oregon Transportation Commission, ODOT, and EMAC form a successful, effective relationship to advance equity? So we have a few minutes, members, if you have any thoughts in responding to this question or any clarifying questions that you might have for Sharon or Lucinda. I see your hand, James.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for that clarity. It's very helpful. The one thing from the presentations that just took place, so when it's all said and done, there's a potential that to run and maintain the system and provide the funding for the additional projects and so forth, it could mean that there's limited funds for some of the other things that we've all kind of brought up. Is that accurate? I mean, there's no way that we know how much money additional will be left over. And I'm just wondering, is what the probability of all of the funds going just to projects and the maintenance of the collection system, tolling system? I hope that makes sense.
Sharon, you want to do that, or you want me to?
Well, I'll take a stab at it, because I'm not sure if I really understand the question. So help me if I'm not answering it. I think it's very unlikely that there won't be money to fund some of these projects that we think are important for equity. The likelihood is that we're not going to have enough money to fund everything we want to. But through the NEPA process, we have to fund mitigation. And so mitigation will include many of these projects that we've talked about. And then over and above mitigation, I think there is a real good possibility that there will be money that the OTC will say we want to spend to promote equity projects. And Lucinda, can you help me if I've said something wrong?
Nope, I think you got it right. I don't think we're going to come to a point where we're revenue neutral, in which case we have no money for anything else except the construction of new projects or projects and just the operation of the toll system. Money left over, yes. How much? That's the question we don't know. But as I said before, setting those priorities about what things are, what things you'd like to see first. It's like the big elephant in the room. We can't eat it all, but we'd like to chip away at it for sure. James, did we?
Yeah, no, I mean, if we said for, every dollar that is collected, what percent of that needs to go to operating the system? What percent of that needs to go to live up to the stuff that's in NEPA? And then it'd be great to understand, once we get to that point, I hope we get to that point where then it's going to be able to at least model for us what would go back to the community activities other than the NEPA stuff.
That's what we keep saying, the early look. We know now that, if you get a dollar, where does it all go? The easy stuff is, there's no easy stuff because it's all unknown at this point. We don't know how much the system's going to cost. We've got to know that. We don't know what our operations and maintenance, we don't even have vendors on who are doing that. So we don't have prices on those things. I would agree with Sharon that there is, or Commissioner Smith, that there is availability of funds, and for how they're distributed afterwards, I would just bank on that there will be funds. And if you can prioritize those recommendations, then I think that will get you where you want to go.
Thank you both, Lucinda and Sharon, for those answers. And James, thank you for the question. Kari, I see your hand. Can I ask you a huge favor? Can you hold that question and write it down, and we'll have a little bit more time later for discussion, and we can come back to you with that, or you can put it in the chat, and then Lucinda and Sharon can consider it while we move through to the next speakers. Okay, and that goes for anybody else. If I'm not seeing your hands raised, to keep your question in mind. We'll have more time for discussion a little bit later, so we can get through our healthy agenda here. All right, next up, we have Hannah and Jermaine, who will give us an amazing toll engagement update. Over to you, Hannah.
Thanks, Jessica. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having Jermaine and I. We're going to give a little community engagement update. We have been doing a lot, and we have a lot more to do. We started an engagement effort for the Regional Mobility Pricing Project in May. And since then, we've completed a series of simple surveys, and we've worked with community liaisons to distribute surveys in communities. We received over 6,500 responses to the simple surveys, and about 700 of those were responses from the cell surveys, the surveys that the community engagement liaisons distributed. So I want to give a big thank you to everyone on EMAC who helped us, encourage participation, and a big thank you to Jermaine for distributing the surveys at the farmers market. We are analyzing the simple surveys, also the discussion group questions, briefings, and all of that is going to be wrapped up in a report that we'll share with you next month in October. We've also done discussion groups, and we've completed 6 of them between August and early September, and those findings are going to be in the report that I just mentioned. And during this engagement, we were doing a few things. So we were informing people about this new toll project, the Regional Mobility Pricing Project. And we were asking people about the biggest problems on I-5 and I-205 and how tolls could help address these problems. And then we're also making the connection to your work. We were asking people how we could make tolls easier on their communities. And Jermaine led an African-American and Black discussion group this month. Jermaine, would you like to talk about this engagement and share what you heard or any of your observations from the discussion group?
Sure. It was a very informative because as I work in the community, hear the community all the time, but to actually hear the community concerns about the toll, because, like a lot of people still didn't know the tolls was coming. And when the tolls coming, first thing go, how are these tolls going to affect my life, right? Price affect my life. Like we talk all the technical part, but when you talk to a community member, they really want to know how is the tolls going to affect my life. And it was good to hear. Encouraged me. I think the biggest thing that was
Oh no, is
and
Jermaine
then I think once we
anyone else?
Jermaine, I'm so sorry. I think you're coming in and out.
Well, I'm gonna go off camera. Can you guys hear me better now?
Yeah,
much
we can
better.
hear you better.
Much better.
Sorry about that, guys. I was go off I think when I put my camera on and my speakers sometime on my telephone. Sorry about that. But anyway, I was saying the main thing our community members want to know is how this toll is going to affect my life. How, the cost of the tolls is going to be, that was the main conversation. Like, if it's costing me $4, am I continuing to go to Vancouver 2 or 3 times? We had one young lady on our discussion. She lives in Portland, works in Vancouver, go to school in Portland, works in Vancouver as a part-time job. Like, the toll will be her part-time job. So just having concerns about how the toll is going to really affect the community was huge to hear people actually discuss that. I can't wait to have that information, because like, I think the interesting thing, like, I always talk about the tolls with the community, letting them know that the tolls are coming, but not having that cost is kind of the unknown. So that's my take for this. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Thank you, Jermaine. I feel like we also had a lot of discussion in that group about enforcement and thinking about like how that would work and how it could impact people if they couldn't afford to pay a toll and then they got a ticket, maybe multiple tickets, like what would happen, and thinking about ways to connect with community to maybe like work, for lack of a better word, like work off a ticket, like do community service in lieu of, having to pay the ticket. So thanks for sharing that. So we are gonna put all of the summaries together and we'll be sharing that with you, EMAC, in October. Can I get the next slide, please? Thanks. So we've also been pretty busy with community briefings. So this is for community-based organizations and also business groups. We've done 11 briefings and it's about 17 total organizations. We have more briefings to do this month. And we are also working on a discussion for BIPOC-focused community-based organizations in the month of October. Can I get the next slide, please? And for the regional mobility pricing project, we have regional workshops. These are getting planned for November. I think we actually have some dates. 2 of them, they'll be virtual November 9th and also November 10th. So 2 options, you can pick the one that works best for you. And we're inviting, EMAC, you are invited to attend. We'll also be inviting key agency staff, and these workshops will be open to the public as well. So we expect an invitation to one of these, or to both of these soon. Next slide, please. Great. We also have some engagement that we're planning for fall and winter. So fall this year, winter next year for the I-205 toll project. And this type of engagement will include working with the EMAC scuba team, equity discussion groups, and then project area residents through neighborhood associations and community leaders. And this engagement is going to happen before the draft environmental assessment and formal comment period that's expected around spring 2022. And really the objectives for this engagement is to engage with project area residents and jurisdictions. And we'll do engagement on key areas of impact analysis, and we're still figuring out what that is. So lots planned. Next slide, please. And now I kind of want to focus on opportunities. You kind of heard what we've been doing to kind of share about the different projects and also your work. And so now I kind of wanted to flip the script a little bit and talk about opportunities for you, EMAC, to to dig in and do some outreach and to continue to talk about your work and get feedback from the communities that you live in, work in, serve. So here's some ideas, doing outreach to your networks. We know that this isn't your full-time job, so we want to support you and give you some tools for this work, specifically, not just telling people about tolls and the toll projects and how to get engaged, but your recommendations, what types of things do we need to have to make tolls easier on communities? So we're working on a one-pager that kind of summarizes your work, and then also putting together a toolkit. So if you want to, put something out on email or social media, you have a lot to work with, if that's helpful for you. Another opportunity could be we can share the community briefings that we're doing. We did it last month, and we can do it again this month. At a minimum, where we're going, who we're talking to, and if you'd like to come, you're welcome to come, and we can share the link, and you can talk there too. So we've been doing those, and we'll continue to do them through November. There's also an opportunity, we're going to need your help reaching out to BIPOC CBOs. So there's an opportunity there to kind of help us leverage relationships and really talk to people about, why it's important that they intend and what they would get out of it. And then there's the regional workshops that are coming up in November. So going there and being a part of those discussions. I believe that's the last slide for me.
Thank you, Hannah and Jermaine. Actually, Hannah, Bill had a question. Are community-based organizations in Washington being contacted? You might have a...
Yes, that's a big yes. And business groups.
Great. Bill, does that answer your question?
Why don't I send you the list, Bill, so you can see who we're reaching out to too.
Yes, please. And I don't know if we have been contacted, Community in Motion, just because as the local Medicaid brokerage, we take quite a lot of trips to the VA and OHSU, as well as some of the Kaiser offices along interstate, and then just see how this is going to affect us and then our transportation vendors providing those Medicaid trips. So I'm curious to discuss more. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Thank you for the question, Bill. And actually, I think this is a perfect segue into our discussion question number 2, which is EMAC. What tools do you have to help us deepen our engagement, and how can you help? So, Bill, you kind of kicked that off. Do you have any more thoughts you'd like to add in response to this question?
Yeah. How soon are you looking to do this? You might have just talked about that. Was it fall, winter?
Well, we've been doing it since July. We still have some briefings to schedule, summer pending. So we're trying to get, this effort is going through November.
All right. I facilitate a group over on our side called the Accessible Transportation Coalition, and we would love to have you guys come and speak about the tolling project. This is short notice, but what are you doing on Friday the 1st at 10 o'clock? Because if you're free, we'd love to have you come to a presentation.
Okay, Bill, I'm writing it down. I'll follow up with you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anyone else? Tools to help deepen engagement, and how can you help? Any thoughts? Am I missing the hands? I'm not seeing any hands.
I think one thing about COVID has made it very difficult to do outreach and engagement, especially in person. Just from personal experience, we at Community in Motion did our first outreach event in about 2 years, a couple weeks ago. So that just gives you a little taste on maybe everyone else's capacity and their outreach abilities at the moment. So if you're not getting the stellar results that you wanted, maybe there's somewhat of a reason for it.
Thank you for that, Bill. Any more hands? I'm looking for hands who want to share about thoughts to deepen our engagement. I see a lot of cameras off. Okay. All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and we'll move on. But thank you for that. And if you do have any thoughts about community engagement, obviously reach out to Hannah or Garrett or myself. Let us know your thoughts, and we'll be continuing to reach out to you guys with our ideas on how to deepen it as well. Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah, thank you.
So next up, we have the EMAC Navigators update, and I'm going to turn it over to Phil.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. I want to thank Lucinda and Sharon, your comments earlier this afternoon. And Sharon, the moment you had mentioned chicken and the egg, that very phrase was going through my head almost simultaneously. And I think in many respects, chicken and the egg sort of describes the dynamic that we were experiencing at the meeting of the Navigators just a week or two ago, because it sort of gets to that question of, well, how do you make a decision with information that you don't have, and if the information and when you get that information, so it's very much a chicken and the egg kind of process. What comes first when you're trying to decide some kind of a prioritization? The team sort of faced that difficult question, and perhaps one of the dynamics that was going on was the sense that by prioritizing, we were essentially saying what is in and what is out. Almost a black and white, all or none kind of dynamic. And I think that's clearly not the case. And so perhaps it's really more a matter of not so much prioritizing as it is sequencing. So a more nuanced kind of process where there are a number of factors that come into play, and there could be different scenarios that come up, which will say one thing comes first, something else comes second, something else comes third. But all of that is dependent on information. And I think at this particular stage of the game, the Navigator team didn't really feel like it had all of the information that was necessary to even begin to think about that kind of sequencing. So I think many of the comments that have been surfaced up to this point this afternoon help to amplify the fact that all of that information is coming and is very important. It's now just a matter of how do we actually engage in this process of coming up with recommendations. And I think it's a much more nuanced process than just saying, we select A, we select B, or we select C, or some other combination of that. The team was also wanting to make sure, and I think that's been emphasized today, that ODOT, OTC, and EMAC are essentially working as partners, and that this is in fact more of a shared decision-making process than it is one body that is ultimately making the decision. So what we wanted to try to avoid was this notion of they said it, not us, which is along more the old paradigm of how business might have been done before. And sort of, going back to this whole concept of trauma-informed perspective, where what we're trying to do is do things differently and not cause harm in the same way that harm may have been caused before through our various processes, then we have to kind of do this process very differently, and it may feel very differently and perhaps a little strange. So it's important for all that information to keep coming. We want to make sure that we understand and articulate at every step of this process what the historical barriers have been in the past, so we don't repeat them again during this process. I think with that, I will stop. Because I think some of the other elements of what the Navigator team was talking about have actually surfaced in some of our earlier conversations today.
Thank you for that, Phil. That was fantastic, and a perfect, integration of the things that we've been saying and the things that you all have been sharing with us as the navigators. So I hope that was helpful for everyone. We're going to go ahead and move on to the survey results. And we're going to ask Chris to step up and walk us through the survey that we recently took. Chris?
All right. You guys hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. I'm gonna put on my earbuds just to make extra sure that you guys can hear me as crisply as possible. All right, here we go. So I'm here to share the survey results with you today, and really kind of provide a brief summary of the survey that you all took, which really the intent of it was to find out where are we with the policy and strategy recommendations to the OTC. After which I'll pass this over to Jessica for discussion. But first and foremost, I just want to thank those of you that filled out the survey. I'm curious as to how long it took you to fill it out, because there was a lot there, and we received a lot of really great input. So thanks for that input. I'm going to try to summarize some of it. Can't capture all of it, but I'll be relaying some of the common themes that we heard. So first off, some of the key takeaways were all policy and strategy options presented are important and should be included in the recommendation, as you have heard today. Remove background and descriptive text from the policy and strategy language and include an introductory or context setting section. So there's a lot of extra language that accompanies some of these policy and strategy recommendations that some of you felt, hey, let's put this at the beginning of a document that sets the groundwork for what is to come. Also consolidate policies where synergies exist or where there's a lot of kind of common themes or common ground and overlap. So that was another theme that we heard. And then provide detailed financial information to assess the equity implications of the toll program and understand whether these strategies are truly feasible. Again, another familiar theme here that we've been talking about today. So if we go on to the next slide, you were asked to indicate where each policy and strategy is in its development. Policy and strategy is in its development. About a quarter of you, about a quarter of the responses for each of these policy and strategy options landed in more information is needed to advance it, or it needs to be rewritten. And then the remaining 3 out of 4 were majority or more, like a tie or more in terms of ready to go. So I'm going to walk you through the more information is needed to advance the policy and strategy option right now, and then we'll get into the ready to go next. So first off, design and implement an interoperable system, dedication of percentage or dollar amount for community-based organizations, implement an income-based toll program that is progressive in nature, create an integrated and easy-to-use fare system, regional bus on shoulder with mobility hubs for I-205, analyze toll credits for local residents in the I-205 area or toll area, and acknowledge that transit is a benefit but may not be a viable option for everyone. So these were the ones that really kind of stood out, where the majority of you felt, or a good sizable number of you felt that, hey, we got to workshop this, more information is needed. On to the ones that were noted as ready to go. Public transit vehicles should be exempt. provide a cash-based option, and offer additional time to pay a toll bill without incurring fines. So those were some of the ones that really stood out, where it was like 90% of you felt that they were ready to go. Finally, I'll also say that there were some items where it was a majority of folks that felt that they needed to be rewritten, and that included the dedication of percentage or dollar amount of toll revenues for transit and active transportation, as well as to address diversion. We also had providing credits, exemptions, or discounts for drivers who are people experiencing low income that surfaced. A balanced approach of focusing on highways and areas further from the highway, and finally analyzing impacts to affordability by percentage of household income. So those stood out as the ones that, like I said, a lot of folks wanted to see kind of continue to be workshopped and rewritten. Finally, some additional policy strategy options to be considered surfaced, including identifying a baseline for inequalities today to inform future measurement, forming corridor-specific community councils to help support implementation, evaluation, and equity lens application, and just being more explicit about carbon emissions and vehicle miles traveled reduction and the availability of multimodal transportation options as being key to achieving equity and congestion management, really kind of hitting that head on and make it more front and center. So that's about it from my end. I'll pass it over to Jessica to take it from here.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that update on the survey results. So, while we have this fresh in our heads, let's do a quick pulse poll. So Nick, if you can bring up the poll, we'll do a quick pulse poll to ask how close are we to finalizing EMAC's recommendation for the OTC in November? Are we more than halfway there? 80%, 100%, less than that. So let's just, and again, this poll is really only for the members, and we appreciate everyone just allowing the members to take this poll. So yeah, let us know what your thoughts are about that poll. And while we're doing that, I know we're going to circle back and ask some of the questions that we weren't able to ask earlier. But is everybody taking the poll? It looks like only one person has answered from what I'm reading on the screen. Okay. So the question is, how close are we to finalizing EMAC's communication of a draft recommendation to the OTC in November? And it's the usual poll that we've been taking, for the past few meetings, where we're just giving a percentage of how close we think we are. Can everybody see the poll?
Hey, Jessica, this is Amanda. It popped up and then it went away, and then it popped up and went away, and I don't see it on the bottom of my screen to bring it back up. So
good. Thank you, Amanda. So Nick, can you and maybe Nicole, maybe let's just pull up everybody's face for now, and then we'll try to pull up the poll again. Sorry for the technical difficulty. If you guys have a little patience.
And Amanda, if you want to put your answer in the chat, we can record it that way for you, and we'll make sure, because if I relaunch the poll, it will clear the results. So I want to make sure that we get it all.
I was able to vote on the second time, but I was letting you know that it was kind of wonky. Maybe that was just me, but.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Jessica, are we ready to end this poll?
Let's end it. Okay. So 42% of you think that we're halfway there, and 50% of you think that we're somewhere between 60 to 80%. That's good news. And then there's some of you that think we're not even 40% there. All right, cool. So well, first of all, does anyone have any clarifying questions for Chris about the survey results? I'm not seeing any hands.
Or if
So
there was anything that I missed,
yeah,
you know, that somebody stated that you wanted to vocalize, that's fine as well. It looks like we had a handout. Is that right?
do we? I'm sorry.
Hey, Chris, I
Pause
had
for
a
a
quick
second.
question. Sorry, I
Sure.
raised my hand and lowered it. And you probably said this, but I am multitasking if I'm honest. How many of us participated?
I believe it was 8. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jessica.
That's what I understand. It was 8 participants.
Yeah.
And Jessica, do you have a sense of how many people just participated on that quick survey?
You know what? I'm going to have to rely on Nick for that. Good question, John. Nick, can you tell us how many participated in the survey?
It was 12, and I think we have 12 EMAC members on the meeting today.
Excellent. So the only thing I would say is, Chris, you said this, it was a beast of a survey. I mean, I was like, wait, what is that question? Let me go back and look at it. Now I was like, I better look at the policy because I don't want to be wrong. So I would hope that there's a chance, to check in with the folks who didn't submit, just to, even if it's a phone call, just to get a sense of where they're at. Because I think we all recognize that all of us have committed a lot of time to this, but that includes staff. And I know you guys need this to keep moving this thing forward. So it was a pain, but it was good to actually sort of really be honest about where I think we're at. So I was glad to get it done. So thank you.
Yeah, and on that, initially the thought was to do like a prioritization exercise where it was like 1 to 5. And based on input, including from some of the EMAC members, we decided to go with more of a qualitative approach. So I'm thinking that that's part of what kind of extended out, made it feel more of a substantive exercise rather than just doing a numbers game, right? Having to think about it and process and then jot down your thoughts and whatnot. So in retrospect, yes, it was. And it's good to hear that from you, by the way, John, that it was a little too extensive. On the flip side, though, we got some really good stuff. We got some really good input from those of you guys that filled out the survey. So again, thank you to those that went through with the painful exercise.
And I would also just like to add that we got a lot of excellent direction from the navigators. To Chris's point, originally we were going to try to make it a prioritization exercise, but the navigators kind of redirected us, and that was quite helpful. So, and I think, so, 8 of you did respond, and then the rest of you didn't. So we'll try to make sure that we contact and talk with each one of you individually in between, so we your voices are heard. But we appreciate the 8 that did respond, and those of you that were not able to, maybe if you just want to reach out and say, we'll meet with you and we'll talk with you personally and make sure that we get all of your input as well. So any more thoughts on the survey? Okay, so I think we're going to jump into our discussion now, and I want to, as promised, go back to people that already had some questions from our earlier part of the meeting. So I think I'm going to start with Kari. If you can recall your question, love to hear from you now.
Thanks, Jessica, and thanks everyone for the discussion. And I think this comment is really, it's sort of a continuation of the conversation we had in the navigators meeting, and then sparked again by the excellent commentary from Lucinda and Commissioner Smith, and what we've also continued to talk about in the meantime. But mainly I'm just reflecting, and I'm curious, like I'm hearing a lot of people being curious about the sort of chicken and egg thing. This committee has talked a lot about the need for mitigation projects to be in place before day 1 of tolling, and some of those projects certainly can come afterwards, but some of those ones that we've talked about being in place beforehand are pretty significant, including, I think that the last meeting or the meeting before, we talked about standing up new transit service, both in the corridor and possibly across the border to Washington. That's going to require funding and intergovernmental collaboration, in addition to the actual implementation of it. And I'm maybe a little bit caught off guard by hearing that the toll rates and therefore known potential revenue would not actually be set until 6 months before day 1. So I'm wondering how these mitigation projects would be able to be implemented in time. That's going to ensure people that in the communities that we've all been discussing the whole, the reason that this committee exists are going to have those options available to them.
When we're talking about mitigation, I'll go first, Sharon, and you can jump in, sorry. When we're talking about mitigation, those things that are part of NEPA, because that's what we're looking at, right? We're looking at the impacts to people and to the roadway during our NEPA process. Those mitigating factors will be done during the project to get it up. That has nothing to do with after. So if we needed more transit in a certain area, we'll take care of that during putting up the project, not after. So that would go before. It'd be part of the project and not part of the operations. Why don't I separate it like that? So the project is, we're doing the NEPA, then we're going to put in all the system and equipment, and then we're going to start it, and then we'll be in operations. So as we're doing the project piece, when we identify things that need mitigating, that are mitigating factors through NEPA, we'll take care of those as part of the project.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, some of those mitigation elements are receiving funding from somewhere else?
They'll receive it from the project. We'll consider that part of our capital cost of the project itself.
And so they aren't dependent upon the setting of the toll rates and the known revenue amount?
Correct. They're not contingent on the operational side of it. So as we're doing NEPA, we're looking at those, what are I would say there are some pain points we've looked at, correct, Garrett? We've gone through and said, here are some intersections, or here are some areas that need like some additional work. What is that work that we need to do? Do we need to put in a sidewalk? Do we need to put in a roundabout? Do we need transit there? That's for the project, not for the operational side.
And if I can just ask a follow-up question, then would it be possible for this committee to have more information about what that bucket looks like? If we can't have the information yet, the chicken and egg piece around, we don't know what revenue will be available for some of these other things from the actual toll rates further on down the line. Can we have more discussion about what exactly that bucket looks like so that we can have a more informed discussion about what we prioritize or sequence and put forward as our recommendations for those things, in particular for the pre-day one?
So I would say that Garrett is supposed to, and I know this is part of it, Garrett, is bring he's like, yeah, maybe, bring forward what those, which pieces we found and what mitigative factors may be needed for that piece. Are you doing that? You are doing that. And we're not there yet in the NEPA to have identified exactly where those things are and what that might look like. Again, we're not there. We know that's coming. And that should be coming in the next 6 months?
Yeah, springtime. And so what you'll see, and what Lucinda is describing, and Kari, these are good questions. And it kind of connects back to where are you going to see ODOT's commitments to these? And so the first piece is in that mitigation. So when there's a draft environmental assessment that goes out for public comment this next spring, you'll see what's identified from the ODOT side as mitigation, what's going to be funded and included with the project. You're also going to see the assumed toll rate schedule that we used and the assumed revenue generation that comes with the assumptions that are in the NEPA environmental study itself. And then the process that Lucinda was describing, this year to year and a half toll rate setting, where you don't really know the final, toll rate and where the revenue goes and that type of thing till 6 months. That year to year and a half gap, that's where Commissioner Smith was explaining those strategic investments. And so that's where we'll we'll try to land, or you'll see those investments happen in kind of after environmental assessment, but before the toll rate is finally set. And we'll have some, like I said, like a year to year and a half to land that.
Thanks for that information. And if this becomes too long, we can certainly talk about it separately. But I guess I'm curious, for the sake of the committee, how the recommendations that we're putting forward to the OTC crosswalk to what you're referring to, Garrett, in terms of what ODOT will be taking care of as part of the NEPA process, because I think that's really, really relevant to what we're decide to put forward and what we decide to recommend. And I feel like we're a little bit in a black box trying to make recommendations as we've been discussing. But this feels like even another layer of additional complication, knowing that there is something, but we don't know what it is, and we won't know until after we've already recommended something. So
yeah, and it's tough. I'd say the tough part about this is that we are starting to talk about equity earlier than any other congestion pricing project has done in the country when it gets to an environmental study process. Because normally you wait to start talking about equity until you do all of your environmental impacts, and then that informs what the conversation is, and it's much more truncated. So it is difficult, Kari, because we are, like Lucinda and Commissioner Smith said, we're talking about we're trying to ask you again, like regardless of price, like what would be advanced equity most? And I think we'll have you continue on that and continue to kind of push ODOT and to identify those things. And then as information comes up, as far as like we learn more information about the project impacts, we learn more information about toll rate setting, about revenues. Those are moments then, we have this recommendations document that you're working on and what should be that priority. And then that's where those commitments are married and made. And you have an opportunity when what gets identified as mitigation, and then you have the opportunity during the toll rate setting process, what gets identified as those strategic investments.
Can I just add a
Yeah,
little bit? So I would agree that we are well ahead of what anybody else has been doing. Normally it's an anecdotal. We know it's going to impact this group, so we're going to run out there and try to figure out what to do very specifically to just that group and nobody else. So we are really trying to do a broad brush on all the people we may impact and how that may look. I think one of the things we could do is we could identify some of those things now that are like in law that we have to do no matter what, and check those off. So that way you don't have to recommend, like if you're thinking of it like I have 10 recommendations, do I really want these 10 or could I use these 10? We can take off some of the ones that are known. Transit, free, that's federal. We know that. We can take that one off. The low income one is one that is now law. House Bill 3055 says we have to do that. So, I mean, we're looking at you guys to help us determine what that level is, how we identify low income, but that one we have to do. So we can start chipping away at some of the ones we know, and then leave the rest out there. And as we get down, as Garrett said, as we start figuring out, okay, where are the impacts, what are the mitigations, we can check those off for you too. So I think we can, start helping to whittle down, I won't call it the list of priorities anymore, sequences, as Dr. Phil said, Dr. Wu said. I think that ideal of what goes first, what goes second, we can do that. We can help with that also.
Go ahead, Sharon, I think, yes.
Yes, I just wanted to say, I hear the frustration and I feel the frustration because we're trying to do something before we have all the information. And it made me think back to something that Lucinda told me once, and correct me if I get my recollection incorrect, but I said, well, as we're doing this equity work, can we look at what other people have done to see, how they did it? And she said, nobody's done it this way before. Nobody has done it at this deep level. And so I think some of the uncertainty is that we're really blazing new trails here. And so trying to have all the answers, we're kind of having to learn and do it as we go. So it feels not as concrete as it might otherwise. So that's one thing I wanted to say. And then I also think, I don't know if there's a process that we could have to have this committee continue on past a certain point so that once we have some of these answers, is there an opportunity for this committee to re-engage? And that's a question for Garrett, because I really think that is going to be important. So back to Garrett, I guess. Or Jessica?
Yeah, Garrett, are you, I don't know, are you able to answer that? Right
yeah,
now?
and actually it helps answer Izzy's question that was posed in the chat. So, and like Lucinda made mention, so we start to get a lot of this information. You know, we asked for you all to have a 2-year commitment a while back ago. That comes up this spring 2022. We're looking to extend some type of iteration, whether it's this exact committee, new people. We're trying to get lessons learned from this process. But we see a similar type of entity continuing on with the toll project through 2024. So through that environmental. So as this information comes up, as the commission is working through that toll rate setting process, we can have people that are not just theoretically or talking about it, but actually you get the information to it and you can see where those commitments can be made and that can be married. And so the only other thing I would say just to Izzy's comment is normally you set up these committees and you have one meeting with the decision makers, with like the OTC. And we were intentional about setting up this committee to where you would go to the OTC and still have time as a committee to then deliberate and understand like the feedback from it. So we really see this November as kind of like a picture in time, a snapshot, and then we'll hear feedback from the OTC and ODOT leadership, and then we'll have even more time then through this spring to develop it even further, and then after this spring, you know, to take it the next iterative step.
Thank you, Garrett. And thank you for answering Izzy's question. Izzy, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it helps. I wasn't sure if it was just, hey, here are these recommendations, and then we walk away. So that does help, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I think, yeah, and I think it's very helpful to keep in mind that this is the first round of your recommendations coming up in November, first all the way up through the spring. So I think before we're kind of running out of time a little bit, I want to make sure that we get to Diana's question, which is, are there considerations to research equitable funding formula models to aid considerations? Diana, did you want to elaborate on that question?
Hi, I'm multitasking. I'm sorry. Yeah,
No
I'm just, I don't know, can you hear me?
I can hear you. We can hear you.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you so much. I'm multitasking. I'm driving over to doggy daycare. Yeah, so, you know, as earlier on and just kind of, you know, how much money should go where and et cetera, it made me really, I'm really concerned that, and I'm really concerned in terms of, you know, how funding will be equitable across the board, and how much money will be dropped in each bucket, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You know, I think I certainly don't want to say, you know, all of us on the call have been in committees or advisory councils where equity has always seemed to be and always has been the afterthought. Oh, well, we didn't have enough funding for X, Y, and Z under the bucket of equity. I wanted just to bring that up if there have been any considerations or make a recommendation of looking at how other scopes of work found ways to fund their initiatives by using certain types of formulas, certain types of criteria to make these really hard decisions. I don't want equity. I don't want to see that equity is kind of funded as an afterthought.
Excellent comment. Garrett, did you have some thoughts?
Yeah, quick thoughts. I think Diana, thank you for the comment. I think one of the two ways you'll see that show up, because there aren't really like perfect examples really from anywhere that we've researched on what kind of is the equitable formula. It really is, it kind of varies and it's placed in its location. But that was the hope of why we did those research documents, where we pulled out what have other places done, whether it's the percentage or a certain dollar amount that's really dedicated towards specific equity concerns, whether that be transit multimodal or community organizations or neighborhood health and safety. And so I think that's honestly the work that this group has been doing in trying to draft these preferred options is our equity formula. It, is what that could become. So I say that's one area to look at. I say the other area we'll look at is that when you're setting up a toll rate, you're also going to set up indicators on like what are you going to track and measure to see if your equity intentions are actually being addressed. And then you're also going to set up like those indicators around should the toll rate be adjusted in the future. Because once you set the toll rate, there's kind of a monitoring of that. You don't just set it and forget it. And so that's a second place where I would say this committee, and we'll bring to you kind of what that information might look like or where the research is on it, that I was hoping we would get into kind of post-November leading up to this spring on kind of what our research and best practices around those indicators piece.
Just to kind of cap on that, is that equity is not something we're trying to put in a bucket and say, hey, we can't fund it, we won't do it. Equity is something we're trying to run through the program. And this is a great example of what we're doing here. We have you guys as a committee telling us what are equitable measures we can use in our program. Those don't go away. So I would say that the ideal of we're going to just have some equity things that we say, hey, we've identified and guess what, can't afford them, we won't do them. I think equity is what we're committed to. And I think you heard Sharon say that that is what the commission is committed to also. So we do not plan on just turning our back on your recommendations or on doing equitable measures in total. I know they sound like good words now because we have no tangible assets to it. But that's our goal is to have tangible assets and equity. Right now, I know we don't, but I'd love, the recommendations are the start and then all of our work to get them incorporated into our program. That's our goal.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you, Lucinda and Sharon and Garrett. Diana, I hope that answers your question, and also members, I hope that was helpful. I'm going to move us forward, and if we have a few more minutes at the end, we can talk some more and maybe address the formal question that we had. But let's move on to hear from James for the NEPA scuba team update.
All right. I think those first ones, yeah, this is the one for me. All right, so everyone kind of knows the scuba team we meet and we do the deep dive kind of stuff. I'm not just going to read slides. I'm just going to talk fast because I know we're getting toward the end of the meeting here. Equity, as everyone knows, as we've been talking about this whole equity is really at the heart of a lot of the work that we're doing. And so with the scuba team, excuse me, we worked a lot to really dig in deeper as far as what equity means and kind of moving that into the purpose of our work. You'll see more of that to come as we start moving this work forward. We also, like, a lot of this work that's taking place is very driven by, the legislature and rules and objectives and so forth, much like the greenhouse gas emissions and so forth. And so we really want to make sure that even as we're talking about greenhouse gases, that we do kind of move equity into the goals and objectives and making sure that those savings are going to be distributed amongst all communities, so that it's not a situation where one community is being heavily impacted, but when you look at the whole project, it fits within the parameters set forth by usually the federal government. Same thing when we're looking at the transit multimodal options, kind of making sure that people understand that we're trying to move the needle on this work while working within the confines of federal funding. And so there's a lot of work on saying, all right, we want to shift people into more public transportation. Well, it shouldn't be, we want to shift poor people into public transportation. And so we can clear the roads for people who are more better off. I mean, this is the kind of conversation and this is the kind of questions that we're going to need to be able to answer. But we need to be able to look at what we're required to provide per the feds for the funding, but then also be able to explain, much like Gerald, and I think I'm butchering your name, when he reported on the outreach to the African American and Black communities, that's the kind of conversation, those are the kinds of questions that we need to be able to answer for not only the affected communities that we're taking a focus on now, but to all communities. We need to be able to break stuff down into actual language that people are going to understand. If we'd switch to the next slide. Revenue, as we've been talking about, revenue is a very difficult piece of this whole puzzle because we can't forecast the revenue right now. And even after we do get the revenue forecast, again, it's only a forecast. The actual revenue coming in is something that we're going to just need to see the actual dollars hit. But what we want to do is make sure that we put forth our feelings as far as directives on how that revenue should be used. And as it was pointed out earlier, we understand that the revenue needs to go to support the system, and the system being regional transportation and projects. But we also understand that some of that revenue needs to go to mitigate some of the challenges that are going to be created by a project like this. Simpler makes statements more meaningful and able to understand. That's what I was talking about by talking in languages, or in multiple languages, but in using language that people understand and answering questions in a way that people would ask them. Provide definitions and terms for folks and so forth. The bottom line with this is there's a lot of work still to be done as far as digging into the data and so forth. And a lot of those studies, they're not going to take place for some time. And so it's really our opportunity to be able to see this data, dig into the data, and look to see how we're able to use this information and this data as we look forward on, holding ODOT accountable for following through on the things that they said that they were going to do. And I think that by, I'm always looking like, where's the teeth? And I think the teeth is in going out to the public and saying, we're going to do this, and then being able to provide some level of measure and understanding. And then I think that's going to be the start of holding people accountable. Sorry, I'm losing my voice right now. So I think that's the end of my portion. I hope I didn't miss anything.
Thank you, James. Really, thank you for that. And I just wanted to remind everyone that the scuba team, during the last meeting, they focused on the regional mobility pricing project purpose and need statement, the draft purpose and need statement. And that's where a lot of the thinking and what James was talking about, what this update was trying to help us walk through. If we can go to the next slide, I'll just say briefly, again, the draft purpose and need statement. If any members have any comments, any thoughts, and want to participate in more of what the scuba team has been doing, please feel free to reach out to Garrett with your thoughts and comments around the draft purpose and need statement for the regional mobility pricing project. Okay, let's move to our public comment section. And Nick, do we have any members of the public out there wanting to say hello?
I don't see any raised hands yet, but maybe we'll give it a minute or two and I'll keep my eye on it.
Thank you. Sure. So, we'll welcome members of the public. If you would like to address the committee, please go ahead and raise your virtual hand. If you are on the phone and want to raise your hand, please use *9. Each speaker will have up to 2 minutes to speak. And please note that comments are welcome at any time by emailing OregonTolling@odot.state.or.us or calling 503-837-3536 and leaving a voicemail. Please add committee public comment in the subject line with your message. So any raised hands out there? Nick?
None so far. I'll keep an eye on it. Okay, Jessica.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Just want to make sure that we hold this space for members of the public to talk. While we're waiting, if any of you all members have any other comments that you want to share, we never really formally asked the question, but I know we shared it with you earlier. Like, what are the things that you need from ODOT, from the project team, from all of us to support you in communicating your EMAC recommendation, the draft recommendation in November? So if any members have any comments around that thought or a response to that question, I think while we're waiting for members of the public to join us, we'd love to hear from you.
And Jessica, it looks like we do have a member of the public who has raised their hand. Sam
Okay.
Churchill. I'm going to go ahead and give you permission to talk, Sam. So whenever you're ready, you should get a notification.
All right. Thank you very much. My name is Sam Churchill. I live on Hayden Island. And for opening up your meetings like this, I think people on Hayden Island, are required to be on I-5 to get on and off the island. It's our only access to the island. So, of course, most people here are concerned about how much this is going to cost them to leave their home and come back. And if there could be some sort of, range of ideas and range of prices, and if there could be, like a pass for Hayden Island residents, since we have no option but to get on the I-5 bridge, that would be helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Churchill. Thank you very much for your comment. Nick, do we have anyone else?
Not at this moment.
Okay, we're pretty much at the end of our meeting. So I think if we're okay, I think I'm going to close the public comment period then. And any members that we have not spoken to, please do come to our next meeting. And again, reach out to OregonTolling.org. Members, is there anything that you would like to share that you're hearing in your community? I'm not seeing any hands, but I'm not seeing everybody. So if I've missed anyone, go ahead and unmute yourself. Okay, let's go ahead. Hearing none, let's move on to closing. So our next steps include that the EMAC meeting the next EMAC meeting will be on October 27 at 3:30 p.m. And during this meeting, we will agree on what EMAC recommendations to the Oregon Transportation Commission will be. And then during October, we will hold NEPA scuba team and navigator meetings. The scuba team meeting will be on October 14th, And the navigators will meet on October 15 with a second date that we will schedule soon. So kindly complete your meeting evaluation for today's meeting. We covered a lot of material. I think there's a lot of great things that were said. It was an excellent conversation. Feel free to reach out to us in any way by email or phone if we didn't get to hear from you. We love hearing from you, and we want to keep up this conversation. So closing thought for the meeting is that, and I see a comment from John. Can we get staff to provide, sorry, I'm gonna.
Yep, we can do that, John. It's for the transit multimodal work group that works alongside this project, and we can do that.
Okay, perfect. All right, closing thought. We've got a lot of work to do between now and the next meeting. We hope to touch base with each one of you individually, and we look forward to seeing you in the Navigators meeting and the Scuba Team meetings. Thank you so much for showing up today and for all the conversation. We look forward to staying in touch with you in October. Until the next time we meet. Thank you, everybody.